right, so we're at a pretty respectable number, so I think in the interest of time, we'll kick it off. So welcome, everyone. My name is Alicia West, and I'm the Director of Public Design Outreach for DEP. This is the fourth in a series of public engagement meetings that we're hosting about the design of the Gowanus CSO facility project, and we're really happy to have such a good turnout tonight. Welcome, everyone. Let's go to the next slide and we'll do a little housekeeping. So the meeting's being recorded and it will be available on DEP's YouTube channel. Please mute yourself while others are speaking. The chat is active and we're going to do our best to monitor that during the meeting, but it's also going to be saved and the team will review it after the meeting. You'll see the chat feature is the little speech bubble at the bottom of your Zoom screen there. Jessica, if you want to just point that out on the slide. There it is, red box. So we're going to have some polls to help us gauge everyone's familiarity with the project, and we'll also have some opportunity for discussion. We, as always, are hopeful that everyone can keep their comments respectful and listen to one another. We're really excited to share where we're at and to hear your thoughts. So next slide, we're going to do some introductions. So we have an excellent team of design professionals working on this project. And if you've attended any of the last meetings, many of these faces will be familiar to you. Many of you know me and Kevin Clark, who is DEP's portfolio manager for the Gowanus Superfund projects. Our consultant team is listed on the right side of this slide. And tonight you'll hear from members of our architecture and landscape architecture teams, Seldorf and Scape. So Anna Hochhalter, Jessica Arias, and Kevin Keating will introduce themselves in a little bit. We're also joined tonight by Elizabeth Ernish, I think I saw from the Parks Department Planning Division. Thank you, Elizabeth, for being here. So we're gonna, next slide is the agenda. So we're going to kick off the evening with a presentation to make sure that everyone has the basics about the project and the timeline. And as some of you know, the mayor announced the groundbreaking for the first CSO facility at the head end of the canal yesterday. And he spoke about the city's commitment to cleaning up the canal, but also about reconnecting New Yorkers to the waterfront. And during the event, he highlighted some of our design renderings for the Owl's Head site that we'll be sharing with you tonight. And we're just so excited to have his support on a design that from the beginning has been steered by all of you. So I wanted to personally take a moment to thank you all for showing up, for sharing your vision, your values, your priorities for this site with us. And I hope that you will see that we have heard you, we took your comments to heart, and that they are carried through in the designs that we'll be sharing with you this evening. But first, we're going to do some polls, which hopefully I can manage on Zoom. All right. First question, it just helps us gauge everybody's familiarity. Did you attend any of the previous public meetings? Yes or no? Simple one. Okay. Take another second to answer if you haven't. Okay. So we have 61% of you have attended one of the previous meetings and 39% of you have not. So we're going to do a recap for everybody. So bring everybody onto the same page. Next poll question. Follow-up question, how many of the previous meetings did you attend? Okay, for the 10 of you who haven't answered the question, give yourself a minute to respond. All right, everybody's over the poll. Okay. So 13% of you have been to all 3 of our meetings so far. So thank you so much for your continued commitments. And okay. All right, last question, and this just helps us understand how our outreach is working for all of you. How did you hear about this evening's meeting? Did you hear from DEP, through Eventbrite, through a local Gowanus organization, your community board, your elected official, or other? Great. And thank you to our community partners for sharing out about the event tonight and helping get people in the know and involved. All right, so thank you, Gowanus organizations. Pretty nice spread there. All right, sharing the results. Okay. So I'm now going to hand this over to Kevin Clark, DEP's portfolio manager, and he's going to do a brief overview of how this project came to be, our goals, and the timeline. So those of you who this is your first meeting, this will be really helpful to get you all up to speed. All right, Kevin.
Thank you, Alicia. Good evening, everyone. So my name is Kevin Clark. I'm a portfolio manager with DEP's Bureau of Engineering, Design, and Construction, and responsible for the implementation of the planning, design, and construction management of and the construction for of the two CSO facilities. So as Alicia mentioned, we're going to do just a brief overview of some of the background on the project. So in 2010, the US EPA designated the Gowanus Canal a Superfund site and identified a number of potentially responsible parties. And those parties included New York City and National Grid. And as part of that, the EPA has required the city to remediate petroleum-based contaminants at the canal and essentially reduce combined sewer overflows into the canal. In order to do that, DEP will construct 2 combined sewer overflow facilities. And the one at this site will store up to 4 million gallons of combined sewage until it can be pumped back to the Owl's Head Wastewater Resource Recovery Facility in Bay Ridge for treatment. So while satisfying that EPA mandate, it also provides an opportunity to provide some open space to the community at this location. Next slide, please. So what is a CSO? New York City's sewer system is approximately 60% combined, and that means that sewer system is used to convey both the sanitary flow, so that's anything from a home or business like the toilet and showers and that sort of thing, but also storm flows when it rains or when there's significant snow melt that runs off the street. So when the sewer system is at full capacity, a diluted mixture of rain and sewage can be discharged into the local waterway. In this case, that would be Gowanus Canal. And that's when you have a combined sewer overflow. That's kind of shown here, number 6 on the diagram. CSO retention facilities intercept that flow from discharging into the canal and then store it until after the wet weather event, and then pump that flow back to the wastewater treatment plant for treatment. Next slide, please. So our goals on this project, obviously the number 1 goal is to satisfy EPA's mandate, but also to construct a resilient and sustainable facility and also provide a welcoming and valued community asset. And through these public meetings and through other avenues, we've definitely heard from many folks that embedding a sense of environmental stewardship and education into the project is a priority, and we've worked hard to ensure that this project reflects that input. Next slide, please. So I know many of you are already familiar with the site and know that it has been home to the Department of Sanitation's salt lot, and also the big reuse composting operation, and also Gowanus Canal Conservancy's ecological stewardship and programming, and plus a number of manufacturing and industrial businesses on 5th Street. So what we intend to do as part of the project will be to establish the new CSO facility on the site in the location of the existing salt lot. But before we do that, we're going to relocate the Department of Sanitation's salt shed and the big reuse operations south of that, and reestablish the Gowanus Canal Conservancy on the site. And then also, as shown mostly in green there, provide a publicly accessible waterfront open space, as well as some ecological restoration. We have a very ambitious project schedule in order to meet the EPA mandated milestones. And over the last few short years, we've made great progress in that. The design of the salt shed has been completed and it's been approved by the Public Design Commission. And the design for the first construction package has been submitted to EPA, and we're on target to begin that first phase of construction this summer. We're shooting for June. Final designs for the CSO facility and the head house are due to EPA in August of this year. And that's been the major focus over the last couple of months. That phase of work will also include the public realm surrounding the CSO facility, the areas in orange. And then the balance of the public realm and the Gowanus Canal Conservancy and big reuse area will be the last phase of work. Next slide, please. So Alicia mentioned that this is the fourth in a series of public engagement meetings, and your feedback has truly guided the character and of the design of the city's facilities and the public open space. We will begin the first phase of work here this summer, and that very specifically includes the site preparation and construction of the new salt shed and temporary composting facility. And as part of that construction and the remainder of the construction program, we will have a dedicated community liaison on hand as a direct contact for the community. If you have any questions, concerns, you reach out to that community liaison. And construction of the CSO facility and the remainder of the facilities, we hope to complete by 2030. And now I'm going to hand it over to Jessica from SCAPE.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Jessica Arias. I'm a designer at SCAPE, and I'm going to give an overview of the design process and the overall site concept. So we've had 3 public meetings prior to tonight, and all of the feedback that we've heard has been extremely helpful in helping us to develop the design for the public realm. So we just want to thank you again for taking the time to come to the meetings, and thank you for your very thoughtful feedback. We've heard some very clear priorities from the community, and we're really excited tonight to be able to show you how we've incorporated those priorities into the design. Some of the things that we've heard overall are the need for ecological restoration, preserving the Gowanus character, the need for different kinds of public water access, and the need for flexible gathering spaces. So the last time we met, we heard some great feedback. We heard a lot of excitement about the wetland space and the reference to the historic architecture in Gowanus, the way it's reflected in the CSO facility design. We're excited about that too. We heard that the public requested to maintain access to the water at the street end. So we are going to be able to share some more details with you about that tonight. We heard that the need for public restrooms and other site amenities, so those will also be incorporated into the design. And here are some design goals that have come out of this public feedback process. So the design will encourage environmental stewardship by providing educational and cultural spaces. So these are flexible cultural and educational spaces that will be able to be used throughout the year and by different user groups. The design will improve site resilience through material choice, planting, and bioretention. This design will provide public access to and along the waterfront by allowing users to get to the water in different ways. The site design will support ecological functions with various estuarine habitat types, including a wetland that will be a very unique feature and provide ecological restoration on site. And a very big feature is that we are creating universal access to the water. And one way we're doing that is with an ADA accessible boat launch, which we've been working closely with the Parks Department to be able to provide here so that the site is accessible to all users. And finally, the design celebrates the Gowanus character, which is, this unique mix of industry and nature through the design of the facilities. And in addition to all of the public engagement process, the team's been in very close coordination with a number of city agencies. So some of those are the Parks Department, DSNY, the EPA working parties, and the Public Design Commission. We've also been in very close contact with the community stakeholders that are on the site. Those are Big Reuse and the Gowanus Canal Conservancy. So this coordination has really guided our public realm design, and of course it will continue into the next phase. So based on all of that coordination, we've been able to incorporate design elements like the restrooms and the get down at the street end, which are things that we knew were public priorities. So as you can see here, the site design brings people to the water's edge and allows for community gathering and interaction with diverse types of ecologies. So there's a continuous ADA pathway that goes around the perimeter of the site and helps to navigate these higher grade changes in the center of the site where all of the critical facilities are. There will be a restroom, which you can see in the center of your screen there. It's located in the Big Reuse and GCC building, so it'll be part of their operations, but it will also be open to the public. And at the Canal waterfront, the Top of Tank Plaza and the Canal Plaza are two flexible gathering spaces, which we heard as a public priority. So these are gathering spaces that interact with the facilities and the functions of those facilities on the site. The canal walkway connects the plazas and helps bring people down to the water. And very importantly, up at the top left of your screen, the canal get down at the street end helps bring people directly down to the water. And the amphitheater on the bottom right provides a gathering space with amazing views across the canal. At the point, we have 3,000 square feet of soft wetland, which is a very ecologically unique place with opportunities for education that allows for daily tidal inundation. So surrounding that space, there are outdoor classrooms and opportunities for environmental education. So this is a cross section. You can see up at the top right of your screen that this is sort of a slice through that wetland area. And it shows you this gradual slope from the water up to the site. The tidal wetland is responsive to current tides because different plant communities grow at different elevations along this slope. So it's an opportunity to see wetland migration sort of in action. And there are pedestrian pathways that lead right up to this unique planting area. At the basin, there's a planted streetscape and an ADA accessible ramp that helps people come straight from the street down into the site. But also there's this ADA accessible water access boat launch that we're very excited to be able to include into this design. There's also kayak storage, which is something that we heard as a need for kayakers here. So it'll look something like what's in the picture on your screen. And here's another cross section just to orient you up at the top right. The transition from the street down to the water is very smooth and it's ADA accessible. And this floating platform accounts for tidal fluctuations and sea level rise. So it'll be another great gathering space that's there for years to come. And this slide shows that the site is designed to thrive with current tides and also considering future tides. So right now, daily tidal inundation supports this tidal wetland that you see at the bottom left of your screen on the point, and also up at the get down at the street end on the top right of your screen. So considering sea level rise by 2080, this tidal range will change a little bit. It'll migrate sort of upwards in that tidal wetland, but the majority of the site will be free from the floodplain and accessible to the public. And this slide shows the 100-year storm scenario, which would be very infrequent, but a potential scenario both now and in 2080. So you can see the critical facilities are designed to be above the floodplain, but the public realm is floodable, and we're considering durability of materials and planting and salt tolerance in the rest of the site. So now I will pass it to Kevin, who will talk about the CSO facility design.
Thanks, Jessica. Hello, everyone. My name is Kevin Keating. I'm a partner at Soldorf Architects. It's a pleasure to be here again with you this evening. Please allow me just a little bit of your time to show you and walk you through the designs for the CSO facility itself and the area just immediately surrounding the head house. I just want to say that the narrative for our design approach really has come from the community, and I hope that you could see this in this presentation. So here, as Kevin mentioned, this is kind of considered right now the phase 2 for the project. It is consistent of the CSO facility itself, the underground work, and the immediate area surrounding the facility as shown here within the dash line. Next slide, please. Just want to indicate how the facility is located and why it's located where it is. There is a current CSO pipe under 2nd Avenue, which currently discharges at the outfall point that will be capped at the end of 2nd Avenue. The water will be diverted into the facility, indicated where the red line is. That comes into what will be the primary screening elements that will clear the water of any physical debris that may enter or have infiltrated into the system. And then the tanks will sequentially fill up as a storm is still hovering over the city. Once that storm dissipates, the water will be pumped through the degridders and then down to the Owl's Head water treatment facility in Bay Ridge. Next slide, please. This is a really simple diagram of the elements that are above grade. Here you can see the arrows which indicate vehicular traffic that we do have to accommodate. Now the bolder arrows indicate more frequent traffic, while the lighter gray arrows indicate less frequent, or I should say infrequent traffic. We still have to accommodate them, even though they may be there just every once or twice a week, or really just at seasonal times. One important element here, which Jessica touched upon, is the grade elevation changes. We are having to work with a current elevation of +7 feet at the corner of 2nd Avenue and the Access Drive, which was formerly 5th Street, up to a floodplain elevation of +14 feet. Next slide, please. Here, I'm just going to walk you inside the facility. Remember that this is an unmanned facility. It is, in essence, one gigantic machine. It is here to store water during heavy rainstorms. The CSO pipe is on page left under 2nd Avenue. That water will be diverted into the facility. The first volume there that it is introduced to is those screens, those vertical screens that are used to remove any physical debris from the water itself before it enters into the tanks. There is a large large spans that are used to support the gantry cranes that are above these spaces. That is used to sort of maintain the equipment that is there to support the service of this facility. There are odor control vessels. All the air that is within this facility is scrubbed and purified before it leaves the facility through the stack. That goes through a series of carbon filters that are in this tertiary outdoor yard that we'll look at in a second. And then lastly, before we go to the next slide, the tank is mainly below grade. We are doing our best to accommodate as much publicly accessible open space above that tank while providing as much bioretention as possible. Next slide, please. We are trying to achieve Envision Gold. We're working with a group of engineers, a great group of engineers that are pursuing the highest level of sustainability as possible. We will have a strict sustainability procurement process using as much recycled content and ash fly as possible, reducing the overall embodied carbon that may be in any of the material that is used for this facility. As mentioned by the community, we are introducing a great amount of green roof on top of the overall facility, as much as we possibly can to help reduce the heat island effect and manage any rain runoff that may be happening. All sensitive equipment is raised further than the 100-year floodplain. We are increasing that height, taking precaution in the long run. And obviously, as I mentioned, we are storing, and as Kevin mentioned, this facility is storing 4 million gallons of polluted water before it enters into our waterways. Next slide, please. This is now just a plan of the facility. This is at the first floor. You could see in page right is 2nd Avenue. Those dashed lines integrate the underground components and where the water will be entering into the facility. The screening room is our largest volume. It has the largest vertical height in the overall facility. The secondary elements, which branch off there to the left, are where the electrical components and instrumentation will be that help support this process. And the tertiary elements, as we call it, is the yard space, which houses and sort of is the location for the odor control vessels. Those vessels, again, are carbon filters that purify the air before it exits the overall facility. Next floor up is the second level. You could see the secondary volumes sort of peel away. On top of those secondary volumes, we are introducing those green roofs. And the area that does project upward is the large volumes of the screening room and the fan rooms. The fan rooms are there to support the flow of air from within the facility and into the carbon vessels outside. And lastly, the roof plan is being vegetated, which is with as much green roof as possible to help mitigate any stormwater runoff. It includes native, hardy, low maintenance plants that are drought tolerant. And it will help it further increase the biodiversity and support pollinator habitats. Next slide, please. So here, we've heard from the community and continue to hear from the community that they want and really desire a facility that is reflective of the history of the canal and this industrious environment that we are in. Let me remind everybody that we are in the IBZ zone, the South Brooklyn Industrial Business Zone. It is a zone dedicated to industry and manufacturing within the city limits. We are looking to further sort of enhance this and take upon the sort of nature of the environment that we are in. And we really are looking to these images, and the images, let me just direct your attention to that lower left-hand corner. These kind of anonymous buildings that are industrious in nature and have this monochromatic building palette. It's these buildings, along with the image on the next slide here, that create the vernacular of the environment that we are pulling from. This is a beautiful image, an image that's really meaningful to us, and I believe to you. Believe it or not, it's an image of our site. Our site is on page right. This is a picture of the site before the DSMY, the shed, was built. Behind that is the Burns Brothers coal pockets. Creates this beautiful sort of image that really kind of picks on the sort of theme of this sort of natural setting with this industrious sort of facility. The next image, please. It's this vernacular and these sort of geometric shapes that we've really pulled from that really speak to the way we've sort of approached the design for the new facility. This was the image of this pretty ubiquitous building type and typology that was seen up and down the canal over the decades. But this next image here is an image of a facility. This is the Red Hook grain terminal. It is still there. It's still existing. And you can kind of see this beautiful harmonic facade that is made up of the structural sort of elements of this concrete sort of concave form. It's this sort of it's this aesthetic that we believe the community has sort of informed that they want to pursue and want to achieve, and we are trying to strike that balance. This next image will show you sort of where we're pulling from, not only sort of the sort of elements and building elements that are up and down the canal, but it's also the sort of direct bulkheading that has been introduced over the decades and over the century. It first started with timber lagging that you could see here, and then evolved to concrete lagging. And you can see here this sort of tubular formwork that we will pick up in this next slide. And so with this, we've pulled together a palette to kind of understand what we could do with this simple formwork created from concrete. We started to look at how we could peel away at it and carve into it. We have sort of studied a lot of the formwork, and this image on the left sort of indicates the approach we are trying to take. The image in the middle sort of starts to further sort of enhance the understanding about this balance between natural systems and industry. And then further to that point, we are going to use the imprintation that is more sort of symbolic of the natural systems around us to kind of create the plinth in which the building sits on to get it to the floodplain elevation that we're trying to achieve. Next image here shows a relatively simple but yet monochromatic palette that again picks up on the environment that we were in the South Brooklyn Industrial Business Zone. We are using concrete for the building and its shell. Remember that there is no external shell to the building. The concrete is both the structural element as well as the skin for this building, further reducing any need for additional material to be applied to the building. Stainless steel is being used for its corrosive resistant qualities, along with apertures that will be introduced to the facade of the building. These apertures will take on the same formwork as the concrete above and below it. This next image here shows you a series of full-scale models that we have built here in the office. We have tried to understand the mass of this building, both from afar, but also up close, because pedestrians will be allowed to literally feel and touch this building as they're walking up and around the facility itself. We arrived at a dimension for these tubular forms at 26 inches, really gives a sort of humanistic quality to the overall facility. And this final image here before I hand over really shows you what we're trying to achieve. This is a rendering of the northeast corner of the facility. This is now the primary screening room. This is the largest volume in the facility. You could see there these two large apertures that are there to sort of provide illumination and also sort of lighten up the facade in these two particular locations. There's also additional apertures on the south side, which you'll see in a few elevations that we'll present to you later on in the presentation. But with that, I will now hand it over to Anna. Thank you.
Kevin, I'm Anna Hochhalter, landscape architect with Scape, and I'm going to focus in on some of the site elements, the materiality and furnishing. Go to the next slide. I'll really focus tonight on the design phase that is including the CSO facility. So we talked about how there's different phases to the design development in order to meet the EPA schedule. And what we're focused on now really is what you're seeing in the screen. So this image is showing you the scale and relationship between the CSO facility in the middle, the salt shed to the left, and you can also see the turning basin and the kayak launch, and some of the public realm is out of the view here. And those design details will be similar to what we're presenting today in the same design approach, but the coordination with different agencies, including the EPA and other user groups, will be at a later phase. So today we really want to focus on where we are with the design around the CSO facility. So you can see, starting at the street end, no, you can go back. Yep, go back to the Exxon. So if you imagine entering the site from 2nd Avenue, you can scramble down closer to the canal at the get down. You can gather for an educational moment at the Canal Plaza. You can walk along the canal walkway, choosing to sit on different types of furnishing types nestled between lush planting. You can see a community event at the amphitheater and enjoy views from the top of the Tank Plaza. Next. We've worked really closely with our engineering team in order to maximize the public realm to the full extent. There are a lot of site constraints here. The operations and maintenance needs are fairly frequent and require a lot of surface area to maintain and operate the very large infrastructure below grade. So there is a flexible space on the Canal Plaza and the top of Tank Plaza, and those are the areas where there are the most constraints and require facility maintenance. So the primary and dedicated pedestrian areas are focused along the canal walkway, which is vegetated and outside of those operational needs of the city infrastructure. Next slide. In our early engagement workshops, we heard a desire for the project to be reflective of the Gowanus character, and we've been very inspired by the industrial character as well. The roughness of the materiality, the rawness of stones, and an integrated kind of wildness of Gowanus itself. Next. So at our last meeting, we asked for a bit more information from those attending on exactly what the Gowanus character meant to them. And we took that feedback and we're developing the furnishing and material approach that we'll talk through tonight, honoring the feedback we heard, which is consistent to some of the images that we showed of celebrating natural stone accents, working with raw materials, and incorporating planting. Next. So our paving strategy is using a hybrid of cool color tones to extend the industrial character and warmer color tones in the paving stones and materiality to accentuate community gathering areas. So you can feel a contrast as you're moving through the space. We're using natural stone and ADA accessible cobble in certain areas to celebrate the maritime edge of the site. Next slide. In our furnishing palette, we're using standard agency furnishings with accents of bright color where it makes sense to, again, to kind of celebrate and complement the industrial color pops in other areas of bright color, as well as developing a Gowanus specific furnishing style that can harken back to the historical industrial character of Gowanus. So we're finding that balance. In plan, you can see we've incorporated companion seating and ADA access at every experience area within the Canal Get Down, the Canal Plaza, along the Canal Walkway. There's different types of seating in each of these areas. At the amphitheater, we have stone seating as well as benches, so there's variety to choose from. Next slide. So next I'll talk through our site planting strategy. Next. Our design strategy, again, really embraces the wildness of the Gowanus Canal. The input from our last public meetings supported that goal. You can see some quotes in the slide here. We're designing to restore native habitat to the extent that we can, and to celebrate ecosystems from the past, historic ecosystems of the intertidal floodplain. So we're designing for plant resilience, understanding that the climate is changing. So we know the seas are rising, the heat is increasing, and the storms will be more frequent. So our planting strategy really works with that and celebrates it on site. Next slide. So using native plants that are tolerant of coastal conditions, such as salt spray and inundation, again, both for today's conditions and for future conditions, 2080. The planting strategy here will be applied along this area within the CSO facility, as well as throughout the larger site. We have tidal marsh and maritime planting near the 2nd Ave street end. We have areas of bioretention and rain gardens along the canal, and a green roof on the facility roof. These landscape strategies are performing different functions in different ways. Sometimes they're screening the facility, sometimes they're framing views very intentionally using multi-story plant palettes. Next. And in each of these areas, they're providing ecological value by increasing the biodiversity, soaking up rainwater, and reducing urban heat island effect. So I'll turn it now back to Kevin, who can we'll end this presentation walking around the building and around the site to give you a sense of the experience.
All right, thanks, Sana. Go to the next slide. Yes, great. So we just want to walk you into the building, show you a couple more renderings in and around the building, so you get a sense of what we're trying to achieve. And in this view, we're trying to communicate the theme of the project, which is industrial facilities set within a landscape. The surrounding greenery provides publicly open space that welcomes people to the site. On the page left here is where the entry to the water will be. You can see a kayaker pulling their kayak through that green space. Beyond that is the sort of perimeter fence for the salt shed itself. And then beyond that is the CSO facility. You could see the sort of industrial, the sculpture of this industrial facility as it makes its way past the access alley. Next image here is an image just to remind you of the salt shed and materiality, and this sort of balance between that natural landscape in the foreground and this industrial facility in the background, both in this sort of balance of harmony. Next image here is getting closer. This is now a view up the the access alley, which is formerly 5th Street. You could see here what we're trying to achieve. I talked about the verticality and the formwork of the concrete, but you could see that we're trying to also accentuate some horizontality within the building itself, both at the cornice line and these canopy lines, sort of creating that balance between horizontality and verticality. You could see these at this particular view, advantage view, you could see 3 large apertures into the facility. The one on the right is into this primary screening room. That one in the middle, just above the corner of the building, we'll say, is into the degritter area. And that one to the left, which is the southern facade, is into the fan room up on the 2nd floor. And if you pan down to the next image, this image here, this next image, is now a view that many of you are familiar with. This is a view from the Whole Foods lot itself. It's a primary view that many people in the community will see, have seen, and will continue to see. And I just want to point out there you could see the get down right at the end of 2nd Avenue. You could see how we're trying to fit this facility into the industrial environment that we are within. And with that, I'll just, I think, jump back to Anna, who will take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll zoom in now from that view from across Whole Foods to see the canal get down in more of a pedestrian view with the Canal Plaza in the background and CSO facility. So this view is at the end of 2nd Avenue. We've worked really closely with DEP and the Parks Department to develop a design that can incorporate ADA access to allow people to get closer to the water. So this type of informal scramble also includes dedicated seating areas. In the background of the image, the Canal Plaza is activated with a paving pattern that's inspired by a tidal mudflat patterning. There's also opportunity for interpretive elements along the facade of the building. The walkway extends away from the facility here with a series of stone steps and planting to allow for the elevation change up to the canal walkway and signal and the beginning of the public waterfront walkway in the background of the image. The next image shows a section slice through the street end, showing that the lowest portion of the get down is expected to be inundated during high tide. Next. This canal walkway image gives you a sense of the type of experience along the linear walkway with the canal on your right, with the Gowanus guardrail, which will be a common element across a lot of waterfront sites along the Gowanus Canal, with integrated seating on your left, nestled between lush planting, and a tiered approach with that we're navigating with the height of the CSO facility tank, which is on your left side. Next. Here you can really see that 2-tiered approach as we're navigating around the CSO tank, below grade, and the bulkhead structures. There's bioretention and green infrastructure integrated where possible. Next. This view shows what it might feel like enjoying the amphitheater with views down the canal as well as across the canal. You'll be able to look right down Bond Street. This immediately adjacent from that is the Bond Street end. You can imagine shady groves of canopy trees over this amphitheater and an area for programmed or impromptu performance. In the next slide, you can see the section slice just through that tiered nature of the amphitheater. Next. This is a view of the top of Tank Plaza. This is another area that's quite constrained with required access hatches to the below grade infrastructure. So we're activating the plaza again with a paving pattern. You can really see it more closely in this image that's mimicking a mud flat pattern. So we're trying to activate these large areas, and we've placed seating and benches in shady areas as well as bioretention areas outside of the operational needs. You can also see, oh, sorry, in that last image, you can see down to the canal. So you could imagine this, again, the tiered view down into the canal walkway and into the canal. So this is our last graphic image here, showing again just how all these elements come together on site. You can see the relationship between the public realm and the buildings, and the design of the kind of tactile architectural approach. And really showcasing the project goals of treating the combined sewer overflow, constructing a resilient CSO facility, and creating a meaningful public open space that can provide environmental education. Again, just noting that this is where we are in the design phase now, focused on this portion of the design. And in the future design phases, we'll work on the tidal marsh at the point, the kayak launch, and some of the other public realm images that we saw at a higher concept level earlier. So
Awesome.
now I'll, hand
Thank
it over
you so
to
much,
Alicia.
Anna. Yeah, okay. So we've had quite a lively chat going, and we've been working to respond to some of those comments, but we have some time now to do some Q&A, and Jessica's gonna bring up the Miro board, which is the, I love it because it's got the little post-it notes. So we'll be able to track your comments as you ask questions, or, please tell us what you think. We've worked really hard over the last year to facilitate these meetings, to get a good sense of what your priorities are, what you want this space to look and feel like. I'm really proud of this team and all the hard work that they've done. So I just want to take a moment to thank them as well, as all of you for coming out and sharing with us, your vision. So I want to open the floor, I guess, and we'll try. If there's anyone's question that we didn't get to in the chat, we can definitely hit those during this Q&A. I know some of the questions that were coming up were a little bit more focused on function of the facility, which Kevin can certainly speak to. But I just want to remind everyone that the goal of this public engagement process has been really to focus on the design of the city's facilities and the public realm surrounding them. All right, David, you are at the top of my queue here with your hand up, so feel free to unmute.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you? So a couple comments and a couple questions. First, I think this design is impressive, and I want to say that I'm really looking forward to seeing this built. You guys have done a nice job responding to the community. Alicia and Kevin, thank you, and to the Seldorf and Scape teams, I really appreciate your efforts. Kevin at Seldorf, this is just architect to architect a little bit. Hi, the CSO facility is quite large. I was trying to figure out its height relative to the parole building across the street, and it looked like in that last AXO, it's quite a bit taller, although that seemed to be distorted a little bit. I'm not sure. And I love this rhythm you're establishing on the elevation, but given its size, I think you could keep pushing that. And I was just wondering if you could come up maybe with 3 different widths of these concrete shapes. I don't think they all have to be 26 inches, and I don't want to tell you how to design the building, although I guess I kind of am. But given the bulk, it needs to be more supple in a way, or maybe have more penetration. So those are my comments. And now I have just 2 particular questions, and then I'm going to advocate for something which Alicia probably already guessed what it is. Who is building the GCC big reuse facility?
So we're going to be building that back out as a part of our contract.
Okay. How big is the restroom facility that you're showing?
So it's a little bit of a placeholder at this point. We're still working through the program requirements and also talking to the Parks Department about best practices. But that's in the sort of next phase of the design focus. But as the team has mentioned, we're really very focused on the piece that is due into the EPA this summer.
All right. So look, you've really done a nice job. I really think there needs to be a community space down there. Not only for community meetings, but for birthday parties, exhibits. We have a strong arts community in Gowanus. A lot of it's getting pressure to be pushed out because of the new development. And 400 square foot space, I don't think is going to have much impact on the overall budget and is easily obtainable on the site. So I've said it at every meeting. I'm going to say it again. I think that's a pretty low hanging fruit, but otherwise, great job. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Okay, Lisa, you're next.
Hi, thank you. I'm having a hard time getting my head around the proportions of these spaces. For, how wide is this walkway that goes around the bottom of this photograph?
13 minutes, right? I can speak to that. Yep.
Yeah, and follow-up questions since, for next is how big is the amphitheater and the classroom? It sounds big if you're calling them that, but I get the sense from looking at the drawing that they're really much smaller than a theater and a classroom. So,
well,
okay.
to your first question of the walkway width, the path itself is 10 feet and then it's 10 feet of planting. So it's about 20 feet. To give you some
path
scale.
itself, the sidewalk on Fifth Avenue is how wide? 15 feet, right?
I'm not sure on
which Fifth Avenue.
I'm just trying to compare it to something that I'm familiar with. Your standard sidewalk is 15 feet, so this is narrower than a standard sidewalk on a commercial street.
Well, I would say the context is quite different.
Yes.
Which is, I think, worth considering in this case. The available space to the water's edge between the CSO facility subsurface requirements and actually surface requirements was only 20 feet. So we tried, the whole team tried to give as much room as possible at the water's edge, and that 20-foot width was about all we were able to
it's fine. I just want to know what the answer is, because you're presenting it and I'm thinking, oh, maybe it's 30 feet. That would be beautiful. No, it's 20 feet.
It's 20.
Okay, let
Yep,
me manage my expectations.
Yep. It's 20. The amphitheater square foot we have, it's about 1,200 square feet.
Which can seat approximately how many people? Not crowded?
I don't have that number at the moment. Jessica, can you zoom into the axon? Zoom into the amphitheater area? Are you able to zoom in closer? Oh. Well,
close to the same size as the one we currently have at First Street.
I think we'll need to.
We've had about 50 people there, just so people understand the context.
Okay. I'm not sure.
We can get back to you all on that as well, but do you want to, Jessica, since you can't seem to zoom in onto that axon anymore, do you want to go to the rendering? Just give people a sense of scale.
So if you had a classroom, a class trip to that space, you could comfortably seat everyone in your class in that space.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I would think so.
Given that classes are 35 people.
In our earlier design, we had it quite a bit larger, and we did scale it down to feel more appropriate to this zone. There's also a large gathering area, of course, at the top of the tank, and those are much larger.
And what about the classroom at the end? Tell me more about that. I'm a teacher. You say classroom, I envision.
Yeah.
I think it's intended
Okay.
as sort of a flexible space, as Jessica mentioned. And it hasn't been fully designed yet, but I think in our mind's eye, it's, you know, it's actually, Jessica, can you pull up that inspiration photo? You know, it's sort of informal seating, you know, some shade for people to use. And a space that can kind of be tailored to, you know, whoever might be using it at the moment. So it's not particularly prescriptive.
So again, back to the question of, okay, I have a class trip coming to the space. Might we use that particular area for a class project related to being there?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the intent. And as we move forward with design, we'll be keeping that in mind. Thank you, Lisa. Did you have any other questions, or can we?
Yeah, why does the green have to be so bright?
I'm a big fan of celebrating our infrastructure, and I think what the pop of bright green is our odor control vessels, and I would say that they're one of the most important parts of that facility. So we definitely want to.
I agree with you in general, but your introduction was you wanted it to be historically accurate and reminiscent of old buildings, and therefore the color should be more appropriate to old buildings.
Well, I think it's also an interpretation of a lot of, you know, a lot of the vernacular design elements that are around this site. I think Jessica showed some, you know, bright pops of color on shipping container units and that type of thing. So I think we're drawing inspiration from that as well. But thank you.
Is there context outside of this location for bright colors?
I think it's sort of an industrial context. But I can ask the architect to speak more to that if you'd like.
Yeah, Lisa.
Yeah.
I think everybody has colors extremely subjective.
Yes.
And so your comment about a darker green may be one perspective, but I think the balance between this sort of brightly colored vessel that, like Alicia said, is celebrating this really sort of mechanical sort of componentry of the facility is something we want to draw attention to. So we haven't finalized the exact color to let you just say that. But it is extremely subjective. But you could kind of see where we're coming from, and I totally understand.
I know where you're coming from. You know, back in the days of people living in lofts with exposed pipes, you know, the big trend was to paint the pipes bright colors.
Right, like the reds and yeah.
No, I know that. But so I think it's taking away from the trees.
We will once we finalize the imagery and the colorization of the planting palette. I think that will help inform us a little bit on where we take that. So thank you for your comment. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Louis, we've been responding to a number of your questions in the chat, but please feel free to unmute yourself.
All right, I have not looked at the chat, and eventually I assume that I'll be able to view it after you close this whole project down, right?
Kevin's been working on responding to every one of your comments, Louis.
Yeah, right. Just a criticism of the presentation. When you said put the questions in the chat, I did not realize that you were going to take voice questions first. I just assumed you'll go right to the Q&A as it was typed out. And I know we're going to run out of time with all the votes. But that being said, I'm going to hone in on the one thing that I like to know about, and that is the fact that you keep referring to a kayak launch when in fact it is canoes that are being used basically on the canal. And both the storage and dock space requirements are different for canoes than they are for kayaks. And I'm hoping that you'll contact Gary Francis and the other boaters for space requirements for kayaks.
Yes, absolutely. We have had a meeting with the dredgers, as Jessica mentioned earlier in the presentation, and I am in touch with Gary and with Celeste and some other folks. So their feedback has been immensely helpful, obviously, and we will get some canoes and the renderings for you.
Thank you.
Diana? Hi, you're muted still.
Can you hear me?
I can, even though it says you're muted. That's weird.
I'm also on my phone because of my weird
Okay.
audio on my computer. So I just wanted to thank the project team and DEP and everybody. It's so wonderful to see this design, really thoughtful and responsive, and really appreciate all the engagement. So thank you guys. I know a lot of hard work went into it. In particular, it's wonderful to see the boat launch and at the dead end of 6th Street, the get down at the dead end of 2nd Avenue. Love the amphitheater. The tidal wetland is awesome. I think on that, just making sure it happens and figuring out how that coordination works with the Superfund will be really critical. There was a wetland shelf previously in the 6th Street turning basin, and I don't know if exactly how or if it's possible to maximize the wetland pieces as it makes that turnaround into this.
Oh, you're breaking up a little bit. Is it just me?
No, she broke up there.
Oh, lost you, Diana. Oh, she froze. Okay. Diana, we'll try to come back to you. But I think your question was about the wetland shelf that we were talking a little bit about early on in design on the turning basin. And I know you and I had talked about that a little bit. I don't know if I lost her completely. Maybe we'll wait for her to rejoin so I don't answer her question without her being here. Okay. Diana, just put in the chat when you get back on. I see. Oh, Zoom. How we love you.
I think I disappeared. Did I?
There you are. Okay, you're here. Okay, finish your question.
Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay, so I think on the outdoor classroom, I was wanted to make sure there would be various things in that structure, whatever it is, including things like running water, electricity, and storage. And I'm wondering about how it could be combined or doubled as a community facility, which also came up in the chat. So I think that'll be a really important thing to figure out in the next phase of design. And then really cool to see the planting palette. I think that was like touched on quickly, but my one comment, and I liked everything I saw, but one comment is just thinking through the things that will be really aggressive that we love, like the Baccharis, and just making sure there's not like too much of that in the beginning because it's going to come in and spread on its own. Okay, I'm done. Thank
Great.
you all.
Really helpful. Thank you so much, Diana. I want to, and I think I just want to make sure you were asking me about the wetland shelf, right, Diana?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I got a little bit more information after we had talked last time. One of the challenges with that has to do with the permitting associated with it, because you're basically taking away from open water space. So that's one of the major complications with it. So we can keep talking about it, but that was, I wanted to just let you know since we had talked about it previously. All right, Lisa, you have another question? Or is that an old raised hand?
No, but you called on me just as I had an idea. Was
sure.
Picnic benches in the classroom so that you can just set up and do something. But I'm gone now.
Okay, thank you so much.
Did you say picnic benches? I missed the.
Yeah.
Did you say benches or picnic
tables.
benches? Okay.
And they've got some nice ones at Carroll Park.
If I can just add a comment, it's really great that the comments that a lot of you are providing are in this other design phase, actually, because we
Mhm.
have not yet gone into the detailed design for those areas. So we will be able to incorporate and respond to the comments
Awesome.
through the design, in coordination, of course, with all of the agencies.
Okay. I see some hands up, but I also see stuff in the chat. I want to encourage people to raise their hand and actually talk, because it's a little bit difficult to monitor the chat as it moves very quickly, and I feel like I'm missing things. Oh. Sorry, I'm just scrolling back a little bit. Okay, so we talked about the composting facility in the chat, that got answered. Patricia Nolan asked about regarding pavers and cobblestones. Has anyone assessed all of the problems that occurred at Whole Foods with sinking and uneven pavers?
So the issue at Whole Foods was related to the pilot work that was taking place in the 4th Street turning basin directly adjacent to Whole Foods. So there was a lot of settling that had occurred. Most of that was because they were trying out different methods for installing the new bulkheads. And once that work was completed, there were a lot of repairs that had to be done to the pavers at Whole Foods. I don't expect that to be a problem on the CSO tank site once we're done.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Ira wrote, bike racks are shown, but the space is not large, so I think one would just lock the bike at the entrance and then just walk around. You don't want bikes on that walkway unless it's just moved.
Yeah, that's right. We do have the bike racks at the end of 2nd Avenue in that area.
Okay, great. Josh says, love the green pop. Nice. Diana
believe
said
there's
Carroll Street Bridge, but I'm not sure why.
The bright colors.
Oh, the bright colors, thank you. Green will be nice in the winter. I love the bright green, super engaging for education purposes.
I think there's a couple of new hands
Owen,
that
do you
are up.
want to? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
No, I just think there's a couple of new hands that are up.
Yes, I was just going to go to Owen because I got to some of your questions now. So do you want to just speak to them so I don't have to read them, please?
Yeah, you don't have to read any of them, or hopefully you read them after today.
I will read them all,
yeah.
I promise. It's just very
I think the number one issue here is if you are putting bicycle racks for personal cycling equipment storage, consider canoe racks or kayak racks for personal kayak storage. Most waterfront municipalities throughout the country are embracing that idea equally. You know, it's at your own risk, but the same thing when I see people locking up $500 bicycles on a city bike rack, and so why not? Second, the real minutia of we've got a great solar seating power charging station on the bikeway at the edge of the Red Hook Basin, but you have to go all the way out to get to it to charge your phone if you're running low on battery. And so it's a nice seating area, something that could potentially be added just because people nowadays often need to charge their phone. If you're not including that in the light fixtures or something like that. And then lastly, most importantly, I would say, particularly at 2nd Avenue, some sort of shade protection and water and obviously power, so that if programs were or anything happens at that end, I didn't see where all the drinking fountains were, but I would think that that would be great addition to the get down over there. Something that we suffered from when we used that get down for many years. We didn't have that access, and it would have been quite appreciated. So thank you. But everything else, I think I've I was kind of throwing it into the comments. You don't need to answer them in today's meeting, just so that you had a record of thoughts and suggestions.
We will
Thank you very
absolutely get to them. I do want to just, since we're right at the drinking fountain, we're talking about having at least two. I think that's where we are now. And one of them, Jessica, can you just point it out? There it is. So one of them will be in that Canal Plaza, which is pretty close to the 2nd Avenue street end there. And then we're looking at doing the other one attached to the building that will have the restroom. And I believe that when they're, and I don't know a ton about this, but I believe that when they're attached to a building, they can be weatherized, so they can be available year round.
There's an alternative one that is available year round. It's used at the Whole Foods parking lot.
Okay.
It doesn't
Yeah,
necessarily have the water
Prospect
bottle
Park
filling and
has
things like
them
that.
too,
So,
but it requires it requires going below the frost line, and we'll keep looking into it.
Yes,
but I think,
it's below frost, and I think it was WXY that designed it.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, thanks so much.
but it may not have all the dog and water bottle filling features, but at least it would allow use. So, thank you.
Okay, great.
And thanks again for hearing that 2nd Avenue is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for all your input, Owen. We appreciate it. Lisa?
Hi, this might be completely outside of the project and it might be controversial, but is there any talk of any more footbridges across the canal anywhere near this new facility?
So pedestrian bridges aren't part of our project scope. And I don't want to speak for DOT, but there will be an upcoming rezoning task force, oversight task force. And I believe that first meeting, and I think several people here tonight are on that task force. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the 29th, the evening of the 29th, right, Diana? Yeah. So I would encourage you to also come to that meeting and hear directly from DOT on that.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, great. Louis, is that a new hand?
Yes, ma'am, it certainly is. I figured I got the time. I'm going to ask you 3 related questions, but please go to some of the questions I put into the chat, particularly about the scalability if it turns out that the facility is not adequate in size come 40 years from now. 3 related questions. Number 1, what is the time of operation for the facility? Number 2, who will control the access to the dock and the storage facility? And I bring to your attention that in the middle of the summer, when it's 85, 90 degrees and the water is hot, there's a lot of people do boating at night.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask Kevin Clark to speak to, he did respond to you in the chat, Louis, but I will ask him to just speak those answers out loud in terms of like time and operation for this space. That's something that has come up at prior meetings. It's not our intention to have this site like fenced off and locked up at night, but it's still something that we're working through as we continue along with design. So thank you. And Kevin, do you want to just answer those questions that you answered in the chat?
Sure. Scalability is a difficult one to answer. The way that I did answer it in the chat is that the CSO facility at 4 million gallons already greatly exceeds the EPA's record of decision requirements to reduce CSO solids discharges to the canal by 58 to 74%. That's the estimate that they had come up with during the development of the record of decision. In the end, we agreed to build a 4 million gallon tank here, and that is going to reduce CSO volume discharges by 85%. So that greatly exceeds EPA's estimate. And with the treatment that occurs in the CSO facility, the actual solids reduction associated with the CSO discharges is in excess of 90%.
And the questions about time, et cetera, and control of the access to the canal?
Yeah, so on the operation times, do you mean?
When will the facility be open to the public? Number one. Number two, I got a feeling that you're probably going to lock the dock, and who will control that lock, as well as the storage facility.
So Louis, sorry, I did answer that question already. We're still figuring that
okay.
out. We're still figuring
Right.
that out. Okay. I'm just scrolling through the chat a little bit. I see Alexander Black asked, what will it look like at night? What kind of lighting will there be for buildings and walkways? That's a really great question. We are just getting our lighting consultant on board. And so that piece is lagging just slightly from where we're ready to share out today, but we really wanted to get this program in front of folks and share out in response to that. So noted, Alexander, and we'll have more information to come. Lisa? Lisa, you're muted if you want to speak. Okay, I will keep reading through the chat. Hang on. Oh, or Peter, go ahead.
Hi,
Peter.
just wanted to clarify the 2nd Street get down. I can't tell from the drawing, is that low tide, high tide, medium tide? How easy is it to use it all the time, in theory?
And
It is at high tide. So it's not designed to be a boat access, but it is it is a scramble down to high tide.
Any chance it could be a boat access?
Well, it's a scramble, right? So it's the goal is to sort of replicate and improve upon what's been there historically and what folks have been using, right?
Yeah, the biggest issue is just the site constraints with, again, working around and maneuvering with the street itself and all of the areas needed for subsurface access for the facility. We really tried to make this as large as we could, and it is very tight. So this, in order to make it ADA accessible, you need a lot of length, and there's just not a lot of length to get down that low. So the platform itself, I think, is at elevation 4 or 5, and then it's a kind of informal scramble down to high tide.
Okay, so it's just for getting close to the water, and you'd go around to 5th Street to actually get into the water. Is that the plan?
That's what we would encourage.
Okay.
Is that fair?
Will you build another one if it's overrun with canoeists and kayakers? I love what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
You know, the sea is rising, so it will.
There's that.
It will be at low tide. In a couple decades.
Yeah, and I think Anna, just to clarify Anna's point about the constraints at the site, we have to allow not only for our DEP vehicles to get, you know, to that Canal Plaza is where our tide gates are, but there's also private property to the east with the driveway. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating what you said, Anna, but so there is some vehicular access that we have to allow, and that does tighten that space a bit. Okay. Lisa, do you want to try again? I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Which Lisa are you asking for?
Oh, Lisa Schufro has her hand raised.
Okay.
We have just a couple more minutes, and I just want to leave us a little bit of time to wrap up. So if anybody has another question, please raise your hand. All right. Jessica, do you want to pull up just the last few slides? So we just wanted to talk through some of the next steps. We're going to be taking the design of the head house and the surrounding public realm through public design review, public design commission review. And, before we do that, we will be presenting to Community Board 6. And I've been in touch with the district manager there, and we'll be scheduling that probably for next month. And then in terms of construction, phase 1, as Kevin said earlier, is set to begin in summer 2023 with the site prep and the sanitation facilities work there beginning in June. And as Kevin mentioned, we will have a community liaison, and we'll be making sure everybody has that contact information as we get closer to construction start. If you want to provide additional comments, this is the email address where you should send those comments. It's Gowanus Owlshead CSO at dep.nyc.gov. I monitor that email account, so you will get me. And then, of course, this presentation has been recorded and will be put on our YouTube page along with the other 3 public engagement meetings that we've had. So I just want to say again, thank you to everybody who has shared with us their time, their thoughts. We've just gotten so much incredible feedback from you that has brought us this far. We're tremendously proud of this design. I'm tremendously proud of this design and this design team and of this public engagement process. And we've gotten a lot of really great feedback on that. So thank you all so very much. And there's lots of thank yous and great works in the chat. So that makes me feel really good. Thank you. So like I said, you all know how to reach us at that email address if you have any follow-up, but we'll be coming through Community Board 6 next month. So with that, I want to wish everybody a wonderful evening. Happy St. Patrick's Day tomorrow if you're celebrating or going to be in a parade. And let's get this built, right, Owen? All right. So thank you very much.
Alicia,
Yes.
I'm just breaking in quickly. It's not a question, so it won't take any time. Is it feasible for you to send emails to the participants with everybody, with your contact information and all the web addresses that you put into the chat?
I actually just go back one slide, Jessica, so everyone can see that again. But Louis, I'm not sure I can email everybody out. I'll have to look into that because it's through Eventbrite, but I'll check into that. But
yeah,
again,
it would be helpful.
Yeah, again, that email address is Gowanus Owlshead CSO at dep.nyc.gov. Okay. All right. Thank you all and have a wonderful evening. Take care.
Good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.